And today, on the clock, Kansas State, the Wildcats, and Chris Kleiman. Of course, we've had their AD on, Gene Taylor, yesterday. If you missed that specific segment, it is up. And Craig Smoak, take it away.
Yeah, here's Kansas State, and we'll just get straight to it because we don't have a ton of time to break this down the way maybe we have some others. But obviously a somewhat disappointing season last year. Thought that you would contend for the Big 12, didn't end up playing for it. A couple games got away from you late, like the Houston game. That was a shocker that you certainly weren't anticipating. But you lost to Arizona State, you lost to BYU, lost to Iowa State. You lost to three of the best teams in the league, and then Houston jumped up and got you. Now, we'll have the full breakdown again, as always, later on spring and summertime. We get closer and rosters settle down and all of that. But you're coming off of 9 wins, so I think with Avery Johnson back and Chris Kleiman, and yes, there's been more change on the assistant coaching staff, you still feel like you're a 9-10 competing for the Big 12 type of team. But it does feel like last year was a bit of a dip, right, guys? I mean, would you feel like it was a little bit of a disappointment?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the expectations were sky high.
So you're coming in where you're looking to go upward here in 2025, and so it will be, right out of the gates, as we talked about, I think it was just a couple of days ago, Iowa State in Ireland, the Aer Lingus game, the first game of the college football season, and a Big 12 conference game. So I just want to hammer that home for anybody that asks, are you getting that conversation? Is that a conference game? Yes, it is a conference game. It will count towards the standings. But Iowa State and Ireland to kick things off, and as a result of that game, Kansas State will also have 3 bye weeks. So I think they're the third team, obviously Iowa State, then Kansas just yesterday, that all have 3 bye weeks this year. Mm-hmm. So they will play in Ireland. No bye week right after that. Instead, they will play North Dakota when they return home to Manhattan. And then the following week, to close out the non-conference schedule, it will be Army. As they get fortunate that Bryson Daly's moved on. They don't have to worry about him as he goes to serve his country and whatever else may come with his post-college life. But Iowa State, North Dakota, Army will be that first 3-week stretch. Then you turn around on September the 13th, and you will play at Arizona to continue Big 12 play, I guess you would say. But, so there's Arizona, and that will be a road game. Iowa State, North Dakota, Army, Arizona, that first month of the season. So that is pretty busy stuff right there for the Wildcats.
Yeah, it is. But, I mean, that Iowa State game right off the bat's tough.
I should say Arizona, that will be the other part of the scheduling, I believe. So that will not count as the Big 12. That would be that third non-conference game. So I just want to point that out.
But I think you've got a real chance of 3-1 or 4-0 right out of the gate. I really do. I think that you've got some matchups that are going to be in your favor, clearly. Army, though, even though Bryson Daly's gone, that's always a tough one to prepare for because you're going to play 11 other teams. None of the rest of them run that offense. Mm-hmm. So everything changes. That I'd rather have my bye week before Army so that I can take the time to, install the practice nonsense. I say nonsense, but that's what it probably feels like to a lot of coaches is we have to practice differently for these 3 days. And you only have 3 days of contact practice, 3 days to figure this out.
They will install during the summer.
Yeah.
And probably on a handful of occasions, even in August, even though they open with Iowa State, they will have practices or segments about the triple option.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think so.
Did you know that most calorie deficit calculators don't work? My dietitian recommended the Lasta to me, and it turned out to be the only one that got my calorie deficit right. Thanks to it, I lost 14 pounds in 1 week. Ready to kickstart your journey to healthy weight loss? Calculate your ideal calorie deficit using the Lasta app right now.
So that's pretty interesting first month of the season, man. Ireland and Iowa State in a conference game, North Dakota at home, Army at home, and then Arizona in a non-con game on the road. So that's technically your second road trip, and because of that Ireland game, you are looking at a 6-6 type of schedule as far as the home and away go for you this year for Kansas State. So no 8-4 like some have been able to put together, or even a 7-5. You're going straight 6-6. So then you get your your first bye week of 3. You'll come back on September the 27th, and you are home against UCF and Scott Frost. So Wildcats and UCF turn around, head to Waco, take on Baylor, back home against TCU, and then your next bye week, your second bye week here. So UCF at home, Baylor on the road, TCU at home. What you get as far as the second swing of the 2025 schedule there.
I'm not going to. We're not allowed to discuss the team out of Orlando. Can't mention them until we get Scott Frost on the show.
Okay.
All right.
You hear me?
Okay.
Sure.
I stopped saying the long version of BYU. I ended that. We are not going to mention UCF until we get Scott Frost on the show. I mean, we will when it comes to breaking down.
Yeah, I think we got to mention him somewhat.
I mean, yeah. But
you're going to call you're going to speak about him like Voldemort, like they should not be named?
Listen, with my connection and the historic part of my tradition of Nebraska football, we couldn't get him on when he was there.
Yeah.
He's
right.
kind of
I don't think we can do that because we'll never talk about UCF again. So it's a nice idea,
Do you think you feel like he maybe wants to keep a little distance from you?
Yeah, no, I think he's worried. No, but to get to because we have Scott Fry, I love to talk to him. I really want to get him on. I think it's a great hire for UCF. I hope it is for them, but we're going to have.
I mean, look, it's so hard to say anything about UCF. Like, I've kind of picked them to lose every game we've talked about.
Yeah,
like, if you think about it in your head.
Let's get to Kansas State.
Yeah, we can talk about UCF.
But I mean, to this point, I continue to do that. This is, though, like, after UCF, this is where it starts to get hard for Kansas State. Like, they have a great shot at being 5-0, and then they hit the really hard part right here in the middle.
Yeah, they didn't play Baylor last year, so that game in Waco, the last time we saw them, they beat the ever-loving dog mess out of Baylor in Waco. So I don't know that it'll carry over 2 years later, but I remember it very well. I remember that being a rock bottom for Dave Aranda. Yep. But, yeah, that's when they will return, and then TCU. So then the break, then they come back, Sunflower Showdown. They get full 2 weeks to prepare for hated rival Kansas, and that will be in Lawrence. Then turn around and play Texas Tech at home, so they get the Red Raiders in what could be at that point like a Big 12 championship type matchup. And then another break. So they come back in just the 2 games at Kansas and then Texas Tech. So you can really focus a lot of resources in those couple of weeks that you have to prepare on just those 2 games, really. And then you get that last break, and it's your final 3-game stretch. You'll go to Stillwater on November the 15th, and all these games are Saturdays, every single one. You will play on Saturday every single week if you're a K-State fan. But at Stillwater to take on the Pokes, then to Utah. So back-to-back road games. The only time that happens at all in the schedule is in that final 3-week stretch when you go to Stillwater and then Salt Lake City. And then you're back home on Saturday, November the 29th to take on Colorado and Deion Sanders. There is the schedule. 3 bye weeks, full split between home and away. Only 1 week where you go back-to-back road games. And you do start off with that game in Ireland and then back-to-back home games for the only time on that schedule. So it's one on paper where it looks a little tough. I mean, there's definitely, I think a lot will depend on how that first month goes of sort of where you feel, but I do think that you feel like you can be 4-0. The only game that really probably comes into question is that very first game against Iowa State, but who knows, maybe Army catches you or, you have trouble dealing with that. I think, though, that's a nice little non-conference, and you add Arizona as a non-con team as well because of the Pac-12 dissolving. So that'll be over after this year. But there you go. There's the schedule. 3 bye weeks, and you miss out on playing, let's see, just off the top of my head.
West Virginia.
You don't play West Virginia. You will not play Cincinnati. You do play
BYU.
You don't play Houston as well, but you do miss BYU. That's probably the most notable. You do play 3 of the 4 Texas teams, though. And you don't play
Arizona State.
So that's another team. So Arizona State, BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, the teams they will not see in league play, but and maybe I'm missing one as well.
And West Virginia.
And West Virginia. Yeah. But, I mean, you get Tech, you get TCU, you get Baylor. And then I think a lot of these other ones you really don't quite know. And they might not even be quite what we expect, but the others you certainly don't feel confident enough putting them on a platform without seeing a lot more, whereas those others you're taking over what happened last year, and a lot of that is carrying over, unlike a Colorado with all that they lose.
Well, by
Baylor
the
brings a
time you
lot
play-
back.
by the time
TCU
you-
brings a lot back.
By the time you play Colorado, they could be a completely, like veteran-laden, experienced team too.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a schedule that you could definitely see them winning 10 games or so and getting into the Big 12 championship. But there you go. There's the K-State schedule.
A lot on the table that opening game in Dublin. The two teams that feel like they should be playing, if not winning a Big 12 title, they open up in August. And then from that point on, you'll see what happens the rest of the way.